Welcome to episode 289 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Baltimore Ravens Dave Lang about digital, fans, and innovation.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals.
And now, here's your host who is helping grassroots sports leverage digital, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan. You can find me and most things Sports Geek at sportsgeekhq.com. You can find the podcast on all good podcast platforms, my favourite Pocket Cast, but also on Apple, Google, Spotify, and the like. And we're uploading the podcast onto YouTube. You can listen to them there, but we're also going to be uploading soon video versions of the podcast chats because we're now in a Zoom world, aren't we? Also, don't forget you can subscribe to Sports Geek News, which comes out every week. It's got all the links, everything that I read that you should be reading. You can sign up for that at sportsgeekhq.com/SGN. Join over 4,000 sports executives that read that on a weekly basis. As always, if you want to reach me anyway, you can do so via email, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, or send me a tweet at Sean Callanan, or send me a DM on Twitter or LinkedIn or the like. Love getting feedback on the podcast and what you're up to. Before I get into this week's episode where I chatted with Dave Lang from the Baltimore Ravens, just want a quick recap. The Sports Biz Zoom calls are continuing. They're now in a fortnightly format, once every 2 weeks. Same system, RSVP by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom calls. We have powered past 60 calls so far in 2020. They've been terrific for me to stay connected with you and have conversations around what is happening in the industry, both here in Australia, but also talking to people in the US, in North America, in Europe, how we are all adjusting to what this new world is currently offering, dealing with a pandemic and the challenges that it does provide, but also some of the opportunities. So there are 4 Zoom calls remaining for the year. November 10, 11, if you're listening to this very, very quickly, you should be able to still RSVP. We're going to talk about planning for 2021. Surely next year will be better, but how do you make plans for 2021 coming out of this? And then November 24, 25, we're going to dive into the data and sponsorship piece. We did scratch on it a little bit earlier in the year, but I feel like there's more to work there. There's more to discuss. So if you work in the data side, if you work in the sponsorship side, love to have you along to discuss that. And then December 8, 9, something that I think everyone's really trying to tackle is developing new revenue in sports. Where are the new revenue opportunities? What should we be looking at? And then the week before Christmas, December 22, 23, I contemplated not having a Sports Biz Zoom, but then I thought, hey, it's been this weird kind of year. Why not have a Sports Biz Zoom Christmas party? So get festive, come along. It'll be mainly networking, but let's try to have some fun. It's been a challenging year. So please come along. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom calls. Really do appreciate everyone coming along and locking into their calendar to do a bit of networking, a bit of learning, a bit of sharing of ideas. They've been tremendous to me, and the feedback I have been getting from people who have been coming along has been the same. So if you haven't come along yet, lock in a time, clear your calendar for an hour. It's a lot like going to a conference and meeting new people and hearing new ideas, things we haven't been able to do in 2020. Also, lastly, before I get into the interview, if you please check out the Patreon campaign. Patreon campaign helps me support the costs around producing the podcast, the Zoom calls, and everything around all the Sports Geek content. I'm really pleased to say the Patreon is now covering those costs on a monthly basis. So things like podcasting, hosting bills, podcast editor fees, and all of the things that are related to getting the podcast out and getting the newsletter out and paying for all the services that are there. The podcast, the Patreon support is now paying for that. So I'm really appreciative of the last 2 months that has been paid for. And really, I really do appreciate the people who have supported people like Shaquila Williams. Shaquila, I hope I've said your name right. If I haven't, please send me a message and we'll get it right for next time. She came on board as a Patreon subscriber, as did Luke Woolley. So I really do appreciate people who have come on board as supporters. You can do so for as little as $4 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month. You can pick. And additionally, now Patreon has actually added the ability to do it in an annual form. So rather than getting a small little charge on your credit card that you keep having a look at and trying to figure out what it was, you can now do it annually. So if you want to become a Patreon subscriber, you can do so and get a 10% discount as an annual subscriber. If you're currently a monthly subscriber, you can change to an annual subscriber. So simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon or patreon.com/sportsgeek. Both links will get you there. As always, really do appreciate it. I'm very thankful and grateful for the support that I have been getting, both for the content that I've done over the last 7 odd years in the podcasting space and the newsletter space, and then in the last year with the Sports Biz Zoom calls. Really do appreciate it. It does give me a lot of gratefulness and drive to continue producing this content. Also, don't forget, I'm not just a podcaster. I'm not just a newsletter creator. I'm not just a moderator of Zoom calls. I do like working with people who listen to the podcast. So if you've got planning to do for next year, new content initiatives, you want to tackle particular platforms, you want to grow your audience, you want to better deliver for your sponsors, let's chat. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/work. Let's get on a call, or maybe even a Pick My Brain session might be the thing that you or your team needs. Please reach out. Love to work with podcast listeners. Now, here is my guest. He is Dave Lang from the Baltimore Ravens. Enjoy. Very happy to welcome Dave Lang from the Baltimore Ravens, where he is the Director of Digital Strategy and Innovation. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Sean, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to join your list of esteemed guests who've been on the Sports Geek podcast.
Terrific. Well, great to have you on. The way I open up most conversation is how did you get your break into the world of sport and sports digital?
Sure. I kind of felt like I took a different route than a lot of other people. A lot of people at the Ravens, and I know in the NFL and other sports, they started with many sports internships. After I graduated college, was working at a small marketing advertising agency, only about 20 people. And I was a web developer, and I also served as their default IT guy since they didn't really have one. And I did that for about 2 years. And we'd always listen to sports talk radio during the day. And I remember coming home one day saying, I should be doing something in sports. I didn't really know what that was, and I had no experience. And, I needed a foot in the door somewhere. And then somebody that I went to college with was working for the Ravens. He still is working with the Ravens. He told me about an internship opening. And he said, I don't know if you're interested in leaving your full-time job, but if you'd like to move to Baltimore and want to get into the sports world, it's an opportunity I think you'd be good at. So I thought about it, and then I applied, got it, and, decided to forego my full-time salary and benefits to take a chance. And I think I had this idea in my head that if I just, worked my butt off, that they'd have to hire me. Yep. And I mean, that is what happened, and I got lucky, but I realized that is often not how it works out. You can have the greatest intern in the world, and if there's no spot for them, then they have to find another opportunity. But I will say I lucked out in the sense that the world at the time, this was 2007, digital media was growing so much. I mean, this is pre-social media and apps and all. So our digital media department was 2 people at the time, and we have since grown to about 25. So I was just right place at the time.
It is. I mean, and a little bit similar to my story. You're a geek before sports geek. So having some of those coding skills in that early digital days, I've been lucky enough to speak to people like, I've been using Jeremy McPeak as an example with his Twitter handle being Suns Webmaster. You're in that early space of this is what the early web looks like. This is what the early websites look like for the Ravens. And like you said, pre-social media. So that is, digital years, I think they're more than dog years, right? Like 2017 is many, many different iterations of the internet ago. And your role has expanded and evolved as digital as has grown.
Oh yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I feel like over the years I've done a little bit of everything in our digital space. I created our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts back in the day, and our first mobile website, and then launching our first app over a decade ago. So now my role, in my current role as Director of Digital Strategy and Innovation, I focus on the new technologies and anything in the digital space that touches fans, any ways that we engage our fans digitally. So whether that's through AR, VR, CTV, the app, I say all the different acronym things.
Yep.
Like
you're ticking the box. If you're listening there, you're playing your buzzword bingo right now. Dave is like, you filled the card. So that role, like, where does that sit in the org? Because I'm really interested in seeing where, digital plays a role in the org, but also how an org is structured from a digital content point of view, digital product, like you said, apps and the different platforms. Like, what does the the setup look like at the Ravens, and like, where do you sit and where do all the different parts work together in the digital space?
Sure. Yeah. And a lot of different NFL teams are structured differently. To take you back on the quick history, we 12 or 13 years ago, we looked at ourselves as a content producer. Our competition was not the other teams. It was the local newspaper, the local regional sports websites, the ESPN local sites. So we wanted to create content, written and video and photo, that could deliver, information and news about the team to our fans. So, we've grown since then. Obviously social media and video has become bigger and bigger. So our Ravens media department now, we kind of have several different branches. There's the content side, which is written articles, as well as all of our video content. And that's video even, it gets farmed out for social, for web and app, and then our TV shows and in-stadium video content. So there's the content side. There's also what we kind of call the development side, which is where I sit. And that's like the building and creating of the site and the app and all the new technologies I mentioned. And then we have a social group, and then there's also a business intelligence group, which falls in our Ravens media department. So, my team, I feel like it's a little more like abstract. It's the delivery vehicles for a lot of the content that we create.
Yeah, so it is really in that product space, and being the tool for the content guys and connecting to that analytics BI guys to understand the fans better. Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our attitude since day one has to be all things Ravens, and the approach has been to be where our fans are. So, back in the day, Facebook was really big. So it said a lot of our fans are spending a lot of time on Facebook. We need to have a presence on Facebook. And eventually, it's transformed into the TikToks and the Reddits of the world, and creating mobile apps. So it's always just be where our fans are. So, in my role, looking at new technologies that our fans are using, and it's taking a look at, can we play in this space? Can we come up with new ways to engage our fans and maybe reach a new audience of fans that we're not touching in other ways?
So that last bit of how do we reach and engage new fans and engage our fans where they are is a remit that has been evolving over the past, 13 years that you've been at the Ravens. How is it different going into this season? Doing the plans for a season during a pandemic. You would have had plans for the season, and they get changed. Like, what were some of the changes that you had to do from your role to get things ready for the season, which has, its obvious challenges?
Well, I would say on the digital front and from our Ravens media department front, we planned on doing all of the things that we had hoped and planned to do pre-pandemic.
Yep.
But then additionally, we had all these other executions that would have typically been in person that now suddenly were digital. So our marketing department is great at planning a lot of in-person events We do a draft party. Yep. There's a kickoff week. We have a giant female fan group, and we do a big evening event for them every year. So now all of these, the challenge became, how do we still do all these events, but in a digital way? Do we use Zoom? And then I would also say things with our ticketing department and our ticket holders, season ticket holders, PSL owners. How can we reach them in a digital way? Can we provide different experiences or gifts? So
on that, just for people who don't know, like, what are the current restrictions? Just technically on how many fans have been able to go to a game, and then have you played a role in trying to make sure the fans that want to go can go? How many Ravens fans are able to go to a game at the minute?
Well, M&T Bank Stadium hosts 71,000 fans, and we're recording this year on November 4th, and we just played the Steelers 3 days ago. And it was the first game that we hosted a decent number of fans. We had previously hosted about 250 family and friends, but this past Sunday we hosted about 4,000 fans, about 10% of capacity. So we did a lottery for our season ticket holders, and it looks like we'll be doing that for games moving forward. Obviously, everything is up in the air.
Yeah, completely. But how much, because there's so much to unpack there of finding the fans that want to go. How do you get them there? Like contact tracing and those kind of things, which was things that were discussed in the, over the past 8 months. Like, what are going to be the new requirements of teams, with fans entering stadiums? You're going to have to know people who are going there. Like, how have you navigated that piece and being agile enough to go, we've got no fans. Oh, now we're going to let 4,000 fans come in. How is that been part of your team working with ticketing to try to make that work? Because digital is such a key part of that with digital ticketing.
Yeah, well, so it's mostly in terms of the number of fans. It was our organization, kind of like the people on the legal side, working with the government officials, both on the local and the state level, to determine what the requirements were and how many people per section. Working with our ticketing and stadium ops departments. I will say, in terms of on the tech side, in terms of the restrictions, we had already utilized mobile ticketing in the past, and we were already planning on going 100% mobile this year. So this just kind of made accelerated that decision. Yeah. Easier. But another thing, we had brought up the notion in the past of cashless payments, and we weren't ready to go down that road yet, but this definitely accelerated that. So M&T Bank Stadium is now a cashless venue for all food and concessions. We have reverse ATMs installed. So, and it actually, the process, it's only one game and 4,000 people, but it went really well, and there weren't really that many hurdles. And it seemed, our fans picked up on it. So, I think that is a good thing in the world of sports that could come out of this, is people are forced to adopt certain technologies that maybe they were a little reluctant and maybe they were nervous on if their fans would latch onto them. But, it's become the new normal in the whole world. I think people are used to these adjustments they have to make this year.
But it also, like we said, it has accelerated some of those things. And we remember seeing, those hype videos 6, 7, 8 years ago of, this is what a sports fan's customer journey is going to be. They're going to open their app in the morning, and then they're going to use it to tap on in the different places, and it will all be encompassing in the app. And it was a very much, a bit of a holy grail of the app and the data collection points and really trying to help the fan customer journey. But it has accelerated those things to, more cashless payments, mobile ticketing has been started to being adopted, but that full picture of, hey, the app really becomes the ecosystem and you're communicating with the fan more than just, hey, here's our latest content. So, does that sort of piece excite you from a digital product guy?
Oh, absolutely. We've talked for years about, we would love to have our Ravens mobile app serve as the fans' remote control on game day. And I understand fans' concern of the whole Big Brother and providing their information and enabling location services and being tracked. But we really are we really would ideally like to use it to provide fan benefits, to recognize that you're in the stadium and deliver you content and information that is relevant to your game day journey, and give you discount codes and offer you information and assistance if you need it. So I am very excited about this prospect of, more people utilizing the app in the stadium on game days, and then how we can just make their whole game day more enjoyable, while also obviously collecting information and learning more about our fans so we can better serve them down the road.
It is funny, the pushback of, don't listen to me, when we've got a couple of companies, Facebook and Google and Apple, that everyone's happy to give all of their information to. So it is counter. I guess the other piece of that is, like, so much focus for sport has been the fan in the stadium, and trying to personalize that experience. But 2020 has sort of really turned the focus back to the fan at the home, and there are more fans, not in the stadium. Has that, have you sort of shifted your focus a little bit of where, trying to engage your fans where they are, especially in a case when they can't actually be in the stadium?
I wouldn't say it's been a shift, just because I recognize that obviously in a normal year on game day, the 71,000 people that paid to come to our stadium are very important, and we want to make sure that they have the best experience possible at our stadium. But I've always been cognizant of the fact that we have a whole lot more fans outside that stadium than inside, and people only come to our stadium 10 days out of the year. So how can we engage them 355 other days? So yeah, that's something like, when you talk about some of the other different technologies, I don't necessarily think that they are targeted at the in-stadium audience. It's the way that we can engage that fan that is not able to come to Baltimore for a game, and how can we still provide them a really cool way to connect with our team, other than just watching our games on TV. Yeah.
I want to move away from the tech piece and go back to that point you're sort of saying that, being the source for content, for Ravens, and seeing yourselves as a media player. Looking at some of the content that you have produced, one of the channels that you've done a lot of work in is podcasting. Being a podcaster myself, really interested in the sports teams that do dive into podcasting. I think it's a largely underutilized platform. How have you guys found podcasting as a platform? You've got a few different podcasts out there. Are they, how are they going, and are they connecting with the audience? Are they serving the purpose you're looking to serve?
Yeah, well, I can't remember when. It was maybe at this point 4 years ago. You read all the literature about how engaged the podcast audience is, and just the growing numbers, more and more people listening to podcasts. So again, it was just, this is another space we need to be in. I have to give a huge shout out to Ryan Mink, who's our editorial director and written countless stories on our site. He really drove the train on this and wanted to get into the space. So we first launched a weekly podcast. It's our two main writers, and they kind of just discuss all topics Ravens. They have guests, interview players, and all. And then we've done several more feature type podcasts, where we interview former players to see what they're doing now. And then you mentioned, I think you just mentioned Black in the NFL.
Yeah, so that was one that I was going to mention. You've just launched Black in the NFL, hosted by Clifton Brown, which addresses a big part of what's going on in the US around social justice, and sort of launching those. What I like about your strategy, you sort of touched on it there, is you've got multiple different types of podcasts, because a lot of people think of a podcast and they look at this, two people talking about stuff, right? Which is what my podcast is, which is what your first one is. But then there's this idea of these pop-up, special focused on a topic, short run, limited edition, that doesn't require, hey, we've got to do 40 episodes. It doesn't require the same thing. It's still a lot of effort, but there's a real opportunity there to hit a certain topic and to hit a certain message. And you spoke then about Black in the NFL. That does definitely hit a topic that both your fans and your players are really passionate about.
Yeah, and it was actually something that was being discussed, and Cliff had the idea for it earlier in the year, before all of the the social injustices, that we saw take place over the course of the last few months in America. And then obviously it just became a much more of a hot button topic and something that became a true subject that our players and our owner were very passionate about and at the forefront of discussing. So it just became even more important for us to deliver this message to our fans. We realize that people come and follow the Ravens because they want to hear about football. So it has that football component, and there's interviews with a lot of players and people in the NFL. But it's also, we're not blind and ignoring what's going on in the world right now. And there's important topics off the football field that need to be discussed. So it just was really important for us to be involved in that conversation.
And that's the thing about podcasts. It's completely opt-in. Like, it's not like, hey, what are you doing putting this stuff in my feed? I don't want it. It's like, well, here it is. Here's how it's framed. This is what it's going to be about. If you click the listen button, you can listen and you can stop listening at any point. So it's not like, other platforms where it's like, this is going to be integrated into the feed. It's very much, here's what it is. If you want to listen to it, you can. If you don't want to listen to it, you can. So that's where I think there's some opportunity in the, what I would say, niche. My friends in the US would say niche. I'm not going to argue about it. You can really tackle that sort of segment of your audience. Well, and
I would agree with you that it is still niche or niche. But the two big takeaways that we found are yes, it is a smaller audience. Fewer people will download an episode of the podcast than might read a certain story, but the audience that is tuned in is very engaged.
Yep.
They listen, for a significant amount of time. They subscribe. And then the other thing that's very interesting is there is a large audience outside the Baltimore area. I mean, we actually receive a lot of emails from fans listening abroad in other countries. And that's just been a really interesting discovery, that when you talk about expanding your fan base, I don't think we necessarily expected to have such a huge audience overseas to our podcasts.
Yeah, and I guess the depth of an audience in podcasting is the main thing, even just on the consumption of content. If someone sees a tweet, that's 2 or 3 seconds. If they watch an Instagram story, it's 30 seconds, but you can get 30, 40 minutes of solid attention. Like, the reason I tell people, hey, go sign up, go someone here, it's hard to do because they're currently running or they're in a car, like you actually have got their full attention. So it does lend itself for things that require full attention. So if you want to get a message through, like I said, I'm a big believer in podcasting, and I'm really interested in seeing more sports teams do it. You also mentioned playing around with different platforms. I noticed that the Ravens are on Reddit. Reddit is largely, I guess, unknown or a bit of a black box and not knowing what it is. You're either in Reddit and you're all over it, or it's like, what is Reddit? What led you guys into looking at Reddit and deciding to be on Reddit as the Ravens?
I think it's because, we had previously at one point in time talked, should we get into Reddit? And it just, it wasn't one of the bigger ones. As you mentioned, it's like the lost one. But then at one point we were on Reddit and kind of poking around, and we noticed that there was a pretty active, vibrant Ravens community there that was having a lot of active discussions, just like really good discussions about the team. And I also kind of feel like they felt siloed, like the team wasn't ever acknowledging them or involving ourselves in their discussion. So we just said, again, be where our fans are. This is another audience here, and we should join the conversation. So, and then it's funny, once we did create a presence on Reddit, the Reddit audience was thrilled, and they were just happy that we were kind of acknowledging them and joining their discussion. So, any way to reach new fans, we're interested in trying.
It does track along to sort of a lot of the same stuff for the early digital. Like, fans were already on Facebook, they were already on Twitter when sports started to do it, and it was a little bit of like, how do we be involved? And Reddit, for those who don't know, is a really well-structured, forms these really vibrant communities, has these deep conversations, has these pseudo rules that they don't tell anybody, but there's rules. You've got to do it a certain way. So how do you go into like an established community, like you said, Ravens Reddit already was there and there was already things happening. Some of it might have been, that's great. Some of it might have been a little bit, and this is what people see the risks. Oh, hang on, we don't want to be near that type of commentary. But how do you go in and be authentic and not just go, hey, guys, we're slapping a Ravens logo on this content and now we're here? Because that can go the wrong way really quickly if you don't execute it correctly.
Yeah, I think maybe we didn't go in there trying to kind of like take over and say, we are, because we're the official team, we're the end all be all, We're still interested in hearing what the existing community had to say. I think another big thing is, we just tried to add value to the content that the fans were already creating. And one way that was easy for us to do that was with the AMAs. So we had a few players and other staff members within the organization do some AMAs. And it's funny because the people that did them, a bunch of the players, they loved them and they ended up staying on longer than they had planned. Yep. And then obviously we saw a huge response from the fans, a large number of people coming in asking questions. So I feel like fans just appreciate that, of us trying to provide value and not try to kind of overstep and just take control of everything.
I think that is the lessons from early on, because I think early digital, sports digital and maybe sports digital departments run by traditional comms and media folk that were trying to get on platforms and control the message. And that's just impossible to do.
Right.
And so I think we've learned that to go, well, the conversation's going to happen. How are we part of the conversation is the better strategy. And it's definitely one that you want to do in a thing like Reddit.
And to that point, I mean, this was a lesson that we learned in a transformation that took place, again, more than a decade ago. And I feel like a lot of teams have over the years gotten to this point, but I realize that there's still teams that are, kind of their voice is a little PR-ish. Back in the day, our voice was flowery, sunshine, never say anything negative or controversial. If we lost by 30 points, you'd have to write about the positives in the game. Yep. And we realized if fans don't want to hear that, you need to be able to call a spade a spade. So while there are certain topics that we are sensitive about, we try to kind of meet the fans where they are. And our fans are very smart. Yeah. So if we played poorly, then we need to acknowledge that. And we have tried to, be as transparent as possible. And again, just provide all the information, factual information we can to our fans to keep them aware of what's going on with the team.
Yeah. And from looking at Twitter, I see you've got the key account, Ravens account, and that's where you do everything Twitter live and all different things. But you've also split out with a couple of different other accounts, Ravens promos and Ravens community. And I've always discussed with different clients on this idea of breaking out and having other accounts and what their purposes are for those accounts. What was sort of the strategy and the reason behind having some different accounts on Twitter?
Sure. Well, and these have been ongoing discussions for years. I realize that some teams have many accounts for different things. Yep. We've just always felt, the large account that has over 1 million followers, that is your best way to deliver a message and reach the broadest audience of people. We could create these little silo accounts that might pick up 20 to 50,000 followers. But at the end of the day, if we really want to reach people, then we probably should be doing it on the main account. We did end up creating the promos account just because there was a time where we had so many different sponsors and partners that wanted to deliver messages to our fans. And then also we realized that there was a certain segment of our fans that was really interested in contests and winning prizes and experiences and all. So because it was a little more of a unique or niche group, we could say, for like similar to what you said with the podcast, you can subscribe if you want. And if you're not interested, you don't have to. So that seemed to make sense. And then on the community one, we worked with our community relations department. they in a normal year, our players are in the community every single week doing things. And then we also have a number of initiatives where we do scholarships and grants. So again, because it was a little bit of a niche thing where we're delivering a different type of content, we felt like it was important that our community people could run that account and deliver that content while the main account is delivering primarily football content.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it is common that because that community piece with a lot of teams doing a lot of great work in the community, and there's a lot of great stories and effectively a lot of content from that. But it is something you can't be always putting on the main channel. So the community one makes perfect sense. You still it doesn't mean the Ravens account and the main account doesn't talk about all the community initiatives. It just gives you a way.
We retweet a lot of their things and we post things on the main account. But it's kind of like you said, our players are very active. We have a lot of players just doing things in the community, and we just didn't want on multiple days a week our main feed to just kind of be a mix up of, we have all these community initiatives, but then also the press conferences and football stuff. It's just be a lot that would overwhelm fans.
Yeah. And that's what comes down to, what you review, when you're doing a review and where the content is. And that's normally when we get to that. Yes, it makes sense to break it off to have its own entity when it's got enough content. That's to me, that's where the lever is. So it's that if it's got enough content to sustain it, because the worst scenario is when you go and create a channel that doesn't get any love. And it's why are we doing that channel? We don't have enough. But something like community, always has enough content.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there too. Other ideas that we've had for potential sub-accounts, you think about it, are we going to be able to populate this every day, every week of the year? What happens in the off season to this channel? Would we end up only posting twice a week on it? And, if the answer is yes, it's it probably doesn't make sense to have that.
Yeah. And that's the same one. And, should the mascot have socials accounts? All of these things, it's if there's content and people want it, then it does make sense. And then the promos one, I've got a explainer of different fans. There is definitely those fans that are the content enterers that always want to know about it or get the deals. That's exactly what it's for. And if you've got the content and throughput, it makes sense. It makes sense to have it to say, if you want to be the first person to enter or get all these deals, that's where it goes. So it makes perfect sense. And so from a sponsorship point of view, how much more work is the digital team trying to, make good or convert different campaigns and deliverables you would have been doing for partners? Previously they might have done them as a stadium activation, but like you said, there's only 4,000 people in there. Or other things that can't happen in, because of COVID. How much more are you and the digital team working to deliver solutions for your partners now? Is it from a digital point of view?
Definitely. I mean, it's been a challenge this year. I feel like it's no secret, that there were so many different activations, executions that were in person that were lost, and obviously teams want to maintain that revenue. So what make goods are available, and, they are largely digital based. And I would say it was already, the trend was more digital to begin with. Back again, a decade ago, digital, I feel like, was a throw-in in these sponsor packages, or it involved just a series of banner ads on your website. That was it. Then over time, it's become more of an ask from sponsors. And even more recently, it's tough to just put together a typical rate card or some type of a la carte option list, because everybody wants something custom or they want content. And we always look at, it's kind of like the Venn diagram with the three circles. We say, it's got to work for the sponsor, and it's got to work for us, the organization, and it also has to work for our fans. So it's difficult to find the intersection of those 3 points, because we don't want to do something that a sponsor thinks is good for them, and maybe they pay us a lot of money for it, but it doesn't resonate with our fans, or our fans aren't interested in it. If it can't provide them value, then ultimately it's not going to provide value for the sponsor, and it's going to fail at the end of the day. We want something to succeed for all sides. So yeah, I mean, starting with the draft this year, integrating sponsors into everything we were doing draft wise, and trying to find logical fits and tie-ins into a lot of the content. And we try to avoid creating new pieces of content specifically for sponsor purposes, because like I said, we want these things to succeed. So we prefer to test something out and know that it's something we want to keep doing and it's worth doing and our fans have an interest in before we attach a sponsor to it. But yeah, there's been a lot of that in this whole COVID situation.
So from the content pieces, which you're just talking about there, like developing content series or franchises that work for different partners, has been something that a lot of teams, that has evolved over the past 10 years. And like I said, there was that rapid development of what else have we got that's happened in 2020. But as far as like the campaigns of, data capture or trying to drive sales leads and stuff, where do you, what are some of the things in your kit bag? Where do you send people? Are you trying to drive people to the app to execute something in there, or you're trying to drive them to a website? Like, is that part of your, I guess, your remit and trying to pull those pieces together to make those pieces work?
Yeah, I would say the app and the website. I mean, a good example I can give you, basically when we knew that we weren't going, or we had an idea that we wouldn't have fans at games, I started to look at everything we do on game day in person and decide what of these items can we create or recreate in the digital space.
Yep.
And it was a pretty lengthy list. And there were some things where I said, you know what, that's an in-stadium only. There's no way to recreate that experience. But one of the things, we have a thing called Ravens Walk. It's a very large tailgating area outside of our stadium. It's open to the public.
Yep.
We have games and activations, and there's a lot of sponsor tents, whether it's collecting signups for contests or giving out free items.
Yep.
So we knew with people not being able to be around each other, there's no Ravens Walk in person this year. So one of the big things was creating a virtual Ravens Walk where people they could go in the app, they could go on the website. And I realize it's not as fun as, hearing the live band and picking up your free coffee. But we tried to provide the same benefits, contests and fun, activities in the app and on the website that people can get on a game day, and looked at other experiences like that, different traditions that people have on a game day. How could they still continue those traditions in a digital way since they can't do it in person?
Yep. So before we wrap up, I do want to look back at one of your fondest memories, 2012, being at a Super Bowl and winning. That was still relatively early digital from a digital platforms point of view. In the last 2 years, you've been in the platforms. There's more playoffs and more noise on everything. How do they compare? And you're obviously striving to get back there and try to figure out what it looks like from a Super Bowl. How do you compare? Looking back 8 years on Super Bowl and what that was from an early digital, and sort of what the platforms and what the landscape currently looks like.
Well, you made the point earlier about digital years are longer than dog years. And yep. I think the Super Bowl, which was 8 years ago, is the textbook example of that. I think any notes I have on what we did Super Bowl week, we can throw them out now. They are not relevant anymore. I remember, posting photos on Instagram as quickly as I could after the game because we didn't have good enough cell phone service in the stadium. I will say during the actual Super Bowl itself, we did not do a lot just because we were pretty limited on the access and our normal game day people that we have either in the press box or around the stadium. We just weren't given that by the league. And I feel like if we went back to the Super Bowl this year, we would probably have to demand some additional spots for people to create social content.
It's a constant conversation I'm having where I'm lucky enough to work with clients that are in the big game. And the pressure is that, it's like a normal game, but let's times it by 50. And so the pressure for your digital and content and media stuff is to cover it at that 50x when, like you said, it's tough to do contractually and access-wise. But the thing is, all the attention is on the big screen TV, right? And so, they're not really, if you're really if you're a fan of the team, you're not checking Twitter and Instagram because you're super invested in the game. And so one of the strategies, we've always been, just capture it, capture as much as you can, because the fans want they want to relive it again and again and again. So it goes against what you do for every other game day when you get to that big game, that it's we need to cover it. But it's really well covered, from a TV point of view.
I will say that we did have a little bit of that attitude in 2012 where people are not going to be on our website during the game. They're going to be watching the game. So we were more focused on the post-game coverage. I remember, right after the game ended and the trophy presentation, we all ran to our workspace underneath the stadium and the concourse level and, trying to wrap up all the post-game stuff to make it to the post-game party. I love what the Washington Nationals did last year. Their final tweet of the night after winning the World Series was we're signing off to go party, don't check in until tomorrow. Yeah. That was great. But you're right in terms of you're trying to capture it kind of for archival purposes. Everybody the next day and in the coming weeks is going to want to watch those wired videos and see the insider photos of the celebration and the parade and all. So it's a wild and crazy and very surreal time. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the Nationals because it is a polarizing piece on whether the team should, sign off and say, hey guys, we're going off to party. I'm with you. I think it makes perfect sense to especially if you're working in the team, you've put in as many long hours. You deserve to soak it in and actually seek some of the reward. That's why you're in the world of sport. The fans aren't going anywhere. They're not going to, tap their keyboards furiously and say, I'm unfollowing you, I want more content. They'll just be there tomorrow morning ready to celebrate. So
we had actually spoken with some of the teams that had been in some Super Bowls before us. And the one thing that a bunch of them said was nobody is going to be on your platforms the day of the game. Yeah. Your traffic's going to be lower than you expect. It's all going to come the day after. So, we kind of kept that in the back of our minds.
And it's also how the media cycle is. They celebrate the game, but then they move on to whatever next is, whether it's a free agency or draft or whatever. The news cycle moves on and they don't want to recap a big game that much. Whereas the fans, especially if you're in the lucky position of being in the winning position, they're happy to keep recapping it for weeks on end. So
I do
that's the
think
opportunity.
The one spot would be social. I think that would be the important area to focus on in the moment, because obviously that's what social is. It's, up to the minute. So we would certainly have to rethink our social strategy if we were lucky enough to go back to the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah. The opportunity there is, just give them the right piece of content that they can share the hell out of, and celebrate it, from mine, that give them that digital face paint. And so hey, we won, good on us. So Dave, very much, thank you very much for coming on. Before we wrap up, want to get to the Sports Geek Closing 5. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I do. I'm from Northern New Jersey originally. And my dad took me to a Mets versus Pirates game at Shea Stadium in 1992. I still have the ticket stub actually from that game.
Oh, that's the thing. There's going to be kids that grow up now that are 6 or 7 or 8. They're going to talk fondly about, I've got a screenshot of that digital ticket. We don't have, we still have ticket stubs, but it's going to be interesting to see how that memento is tamed. But most likely they'll have a, Instagram memory that'll come back year on year to say this is your first game. So I guess that replaces that ticket stub. You would have been to a lot of sports events, a lot of Ravens games over your time. Do you have a go-to food or a favorite food memory at a sports event?
Yeah, so I'll give you two. One as a fan, one as an employee. I think my favorite food at a ballpark food is at Citi Field, the new home of the Mets.
Yeah.
It's Mama's of Corona. They make amazing sandwiches up there. Okay. And my favorite press box food, I've been to, I think now 26 NFL stadiums. And my favorite is by far the cheese curds in Green Bay at Lambeau Field. I'm glad that I am not a Packers employee, because if I ate those every week, I'd probably put on a good amount of weight. Yeah. But when we go there once every 6 years, it is a nice treat.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. What's the first app you open in the morning?
I'm going to be boring here. It's either my calendar app to see what I have on the agenda for the day, or Facebook. Yeah. I'm a big Facebook person. No,
that's all right. That's all right. Who is someone that the podcast listeners should follow, and why?
Well, besides Sean Callanan, of course.
This is, everyone keeps asking. This is not a leading question. I'm not looking for compliments, but I will take them on board. Thank you very much, Dave.
Let's see. A few people that I like to follow, Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Capitals and Monumental Sports. The Rock, I think, is always fun, posting cool stuff. I'm not sure, some people may have heard of him, but Jesse Cole, who is the owner of the Savannah Bananas minor league team. Okay. They do things a little bit differently. They're focused on the fan engagement. So I think he's a great follow.
There's so much stuff that the minor league baseball does to ring every single, piece and, stretch every seat and every marketing and promotional dollar, that you only need to, look at one of their nights and go, how do I use Steel with Pride? How do we do a version of that? So it's fascinating what gets done at that minor league level.
Yeah, the focus is on the fan experience and not necessarily winning.
Yeah, definitely. It's more on that entertainment side of the sports entertainment space. Like, it's a fun night out, and guess what? There's sports.
And then I follow, lastly, I read Sport Techie and hashtag sports pretty regularly as well.
Yep. Terrific. All terrific resources. Lastly, what social media platform is your MVP? And so you can, as you are now, you can have your Ravens hat on and talk about it from a Ravens point of view, but also personally.
Oh, okay. I'm glad that you give me the two options here.
Yeah, give you the two options, but you only get one vote for each option.
Okay. Well, so if I personally, if I was on a desert island and I had access to one, I would pick Facebook. Yep. I'm in my late 30s, so I'm in that generation. I don't know. That's where I keep up with people, family, friends. And then I think in general, the world today, I would probably go with Instagram. It just seems like that is the engagement there is incredible for no matter what kind of a brand you are. I will say though, I get sucked into TikTok a lot, and I'm curious to see their growth and what the future. Well,
we didn't talk about that, but Ravens are on TikTok. What's been the driver and trying to figure out that platform, because it's not like other platforms. It doesn't, its timeline is not a timeline. Its algorithm is completely different. It's more for mine. It's more creative led than brand led. How do the Ravens as a team get into a platform like TikTok?
It is very unique, and I think we're still experimenting with it, because there have been videos that have just surprised us. Like when we post a video on Twitter, maybe it gets 10,000 views, and then you put it on TikTok and it blows up, and you just wonder, what was it? You just look at these different audiences. I think actually our number one TikTok video of all time is this video about our third string quarterback, Trace McSorley, who went to Penn State, and he's kind of become this viral TikTok thing where people just post videos about him. So, it's just interesting to see the different audiences, how they consume content differently.
Terrific. So, Dave, lastly, how can people connect with you, reach out to you, tell you that they've listened to the podcast? What are the best platforms to connect with you?
I would say LinkedIn, Dave Lang. You can find my profile picture is me with the Super Bowl trophy. It's a fun one. Twitter, at This Is Dave, and then email is always a good way. Just I always say, if people reach out though, to add a little personal message, because you get so many random people that you've never met before reaching out.
Specifically, you have to say, Dave, I listened to the Sports Geek podcast. I really enjoyed it. And then it gets through all the filters that you have built. Yep. Thank you very much for coming to the podcast. Best of luck for the rest of the season. Hope that you do get to experience that Super Bowl experience again, and hopefully with a few more fans and all of those things. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Find out more about Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process at digitaltodollars.com. We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Dave Lang. Don't forget, send him a tweet. This is Dave on the Twitter, or reach out to him on LinkedIn. And as he said, and as I do suggest, please personalise that LinkedIn message. If you are going to reach out to Dave, tell him that you listen to the podcast. In the same way, if you reach out to me and say, I listen to the podcast, I'm always going to accept that. Especially to it's one of my key advice I give to graduates and up-and-comers in the sports biz space. Take the time to personalise that message, that intro message. It will cut through the clutter. Before I wrap up, don't forget, I want to work on big problems. That was my goal at the start of the year, to work on big problems. I didn't realise 2020 would be the big problem, but that remains. I still want to work and solve big problems in sport. So go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Let's set up a time, have a chat. Don't forget, you can reach me at sportsgeekhq via email, or even, like I said before, via call. Hope to see you on the next Zoom call, sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom call. And don't forget, now you can sign up at Patreon, and you can do so annually with a 10% discount, which is amazing. So you can do so by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.